I married my husband because everyone said it was time. 20 years and 3 children later, he sat across from me at the kitchen table and said the words I had been too afraid to say myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story didn't start with an ending. It started with a beginning that was never quite right, even from the very first day, though it took me years to be honest with myself about that. My name is Karen and I'm 47 years old. I live in Phoenix, and 20 years ago I was 27, working at a marketing firm, and dating a man named Greg who I had met through a coworker. We had been together about a year. We were comfortable, easy, the kind of relationship that didn't have a lot of friction, but also didn't have a lot of anything else. And around that time, the way it happens for a lot of women, the questions started coming from every direction. My mother asked when Greg was going to propose. My aunts asked at every family gathering. Friends who had gotten married were starting to have kids. And there was this quiet but constant pressure that I was somehow behind, that 27 was getting late, that a year together meant it was time to either move forward or move on. I didn't think about it that hard, honestly. I liked Greg. He was kind, in an uncomplicated way. He made decent money. He wanted kids eventually, which I also wanted, vaguely, the way you want things that everyone around you seems to want. And then I got pregnant, not on purpose exactly, but not entirely an accident either. We hadn't been careful, and when it happened neither of us seemed surprised. And once that happened, the path forward felt obvious. Everyone around us treated the wedding as a formality, a thing that was simply going to happen because that's what happens. We got married 6 months later. I was visibly pregnant at our wedding, which nobody mentioned directly but everyone clearly already knew. I want to be careful here, because I'm not telling you this story to make it sound like a tragedy from day one. It wasn't. Greg was a decent man in a lot of ways. He showed up. He worked hard. He never raised his voice, never hit me, never did any of the things that make for the kind of marriage story people warn you about. What we had instead was something quieter and harder to name. We were 2 people who had built a life together without ever really falling in love first. And somewhere underneath the routines and the responsibilities, neither of us ever quite stopped being 2 separate people who happened to share a house. Our son Ethan was born first. Then our daughter Maya came 2 years later, and our youngest, Jacob, came 3 years after that. By the time Jacob was born I was 32 and our house was full of noise and laundry and school schedules and birthday parties and all the things that fill a family's life so completely that there's very little room left to examine what's underneath it. I found out about Greg's first affair when Ethan was about 6. I found a text message, the kind of careless thing that people leave behind when they've stopped being careful because they've stopped being afraid of getting caught. I confronted him. He admitted it, apologized, said it was a mistake, said it wouldn't happen again. It happened again. Multiple times over the years with different women, in patterns that became almost predictable once I stopped pretending I didn't see them. A coworker. A woman from his gym. Someone he met at a conference. I want to say I confronted him every time, but I didn't. After the first few times, I stopped confronting and started simply knowing. I would notice the signs, the late nights, the secretive phone, the particular kind of distance he got when something else had his attention. And I would file it away without saying anything, because saying something meant having a conversation I didn't have the energy for, about a marriage I had never fully chosen in the first place, with a man I cared about but had never really loved. I told myself I was staying for the kids. And that was true, as far as it went. I wanted Ethan and Maya and Jacob to have a stable home, 2 parents under one roof, the kind of childhood that didn't involve custody schedules and split holidays and all the disruption that divorce brings to kids. I believed, the way a lot of people believe, that staying together for the children was a sacrifice worth making, even if it meant living inside a marriage that had no real warmth at its center. But I think if I'm honest, staying was also easier. Leaving would have meant admitting that the entire foundation of my adult life had been built on a decision I made because other people expected me to, not because I had ever truly wanted it. Staying let me avoid that. Staying let both of us avoid that, actually, because Greg never left either, and I don't think his affairs were ever really about wanting to leave me for someone else. I think they were about looking for something, connection, excitement, the feeling of being chosen. that he had also never quite found in our marriage and didn't know how to look for honestly. So we stayed. For 15 more years we stayed. We went to school plays and family vacations and Sunday dinners and all the visible architecture of a normal family, and underneath it, two people who had built an entire life together while remaining, in some fundamental way, strangers to each other. And then Jacob turned 18. Jacob's 18th birthday wasn't a dramatic milestone in itself. We had a small dinner, the kind of low-key celebration that fits a family where the kids are mostly grown and everyone has work and school and their own lives now. Ethan was 25 and living in Tucson with his girlfriend. Maya was 23 and finishing grad school in California. Jacob was about to start college in the fall, the last of our kids to step into that phase of life where parents become less of a daily presence and more of an occasional one. I didn't think much about the timing of it at first. But about 2 weeks after Jacob's birthday, on a Tuesday evening, Greg came home from work and instead of going through his usual routine, TV, dinner, scrolling on his phone, he sat down across from me at the kitchen table and asked if we could talk. I felt something settle in my stomach immediately, that particular feeling you get when you sense a conversation is about to happen that has been a long time coming, even if you couldn't have said exactly what it was going to be about. He started by saying that he had been thinking for a while now, longer than he probably should have admitted, about what our life actually looked like. He said that Jacob was 18 now, that all 3 kids were essentially grown, and that the thing we had both been doing for the last 20 years, holding this household together for their sake, had reached its natural end point. And then he said something I had genuinely never expected to hear him say out loud, even though some part of me had known it for years. He said he didn't think we had ever really been in love. Not at the beginning, not really at any point along the way. He said he thought we had built a good life in a lot of ways. A stable home, 3 kids who turned out well, 2 decades of showing up for each other in the practical sense. But that somewhere underneath all of that, he had spent most of his adult life pretending to be happy in a marriage that had never given him the thing he actually wanted, which was to feel like he had chosen someone and been chosen back, fully, the way people are supposed to choose each other. He said he was tired of pretending. He said he had been tired of it for a long time. And that he thought, if I was honest with myself, I probably had been too. I sat there for a moment, and I felt something I wasn't expecting to feel, which was relief. Not sadness, not anger, not the kind of devastation that you're supposed to feel when your husband tells you he wants to end a 20-year marriage. Just relief, quiet and immediate, like something I had been holding without realizing how heavy it was had finally been set down. I told him he was right. I told him that I had known about the affairs, all of them over the years, and that I had never said anything because confronting it would have meant admitting that our marriage had never really worked, and that admitting that felt like too big a thing to deal with while we were in the middle of raising kids. I told him I understood exactly what he meant about pretending, because I had been doing it too, in my own way, every single day for 20 years. He looked surprised that I had known. He asked why I had never said anything. I told him the truth, that I had stayed because everyone expected me to, because the kids needed stability, because leaving felt like failure and staying felt like duty, and because somewhere along the way I had stopped asking myself whether I was actually happy and started just asking whether things were functioning. We talked for almost 3 hours that night. It wasn't an angry conversation. It was, strangely, one of the most honest conversations we had ever had in 20 years of marriage. We talked about the early pressure to get married, about the years of distance, about his affairs and my silence, about the kids and what we had and hadn't given them, about what we both actually wanted now that we were free to want anything at all. He said he wanted to be happy. He said he hoped I could find that too, and that he meant it, not as something polite to say, but as something he genuinely wanted for me. The way you want good things for someone you've spent 2 decades of your life with even when you were never truly in love with them. We agreed to separate. Not dramatically, no lawyers shouting across a room, no dividing up the house in anger. Greg found an apartment about 20 minutes away within a month. We told the kids together, sitting all 3 of them down over a video call since they were scattered across different cities now. And we told them honestly, that their dad and I had decided, after a lot of years and a lot of thought, that it was time for us to live separate lives, and that this had nothing to do with anything they had done and everything to do with 2 people who had gotten married for the wrong reasons a long time ago. Ethan, who is 25 and has always been perceptive, said, "Honestly, I'm kind of not surprised." Maya cried a little, not because she was devastated but because any change to the shape of your family carries some grief even when it makes sense. Jacob, 18 and freshly graduated, mostly wanted to know if the holidays were still going to happen. And we told him yes, just differently than before. Greg moved out on a Saturday in late spring. I helped him carry boxes to his car, which felt strange and also completely natural. The way doing practical things with someone you've shared a life with often does even at the end. When the car was loaded, he stood in the driveway for a moment and said, "Thank you for 20 years. I mean that." I said I meant it too. That evening I sat alone in the house for the first time in 2 decades without anyone else's schedule to think about. I made myself dinner, just for one, and sat at the kitchen table where so many of our family's ordinary moments had happened. And I felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. I felt like I had time, real time, ahead of me, that belonged entirely to me. I was 47. I had 3 kids who were grown and doing well. And for the first time since I was 26 years old, I had absolutely no idea what was going to happen next in my life. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat back in my chair, and let that feeling settle in instead of rushing to fill it with anything else.